Nora Wilson has been a member of the health and welfare practice at East Bay Community Law Center since April 2017. She works with Alameda County residents to address the destabilizing social conditions that put people at risk of poor health outcomes, helping reduce barriers to care created by lack of stable income, housing, and healthcare coverage. Nora is a prison abolitionist, an attorney, and former Director of Legal Advocacy at Justice Now, where she coordinated direct legal services and medical advocacy for people in prison while helping train the next generation of lawyers and activists. She grew up in a conservative town in the Deep South, and her family members have relied on public benefits in order to afford basic necessities. That experience informs her work. She received her BA in political science from the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia, and her JD from Fordham University of Law in New York City. We're so happy to have you here, Nora. Thank you so much for providing this training for us and all the participants today. We have 114 people on this webinar. We're so glad that you're all here too. And thank you, Nora. I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Leah and Beth. Thank you, First Five. I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you everyone who is present on a Friday morning when we maybe are not our most energetic in the week to come together and talk about such an important topic. Now more than ever, I think it's really helpful to be able to support people in navigating disability benefits. And we know there have been some changes during this time of COVID-19. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here and giving me your time and giving me a chance to connect with you. I want to talk about and acknowledge how much amazing experience and expertise there already is just present in this space, not obviously in the same room, but we are together with people who maybe even experts beyond my knowledge and understanding. So who is present in the room right now? We have, or not in the room, in the webinar, we have family advocates, teachers, preschool and childcare providers, healthcare providers, mental health providers, social workers, case managers, family navigators, service coordinators, community health workers, outreach workers, supervisors, managers, attorneys, and more. So want to acknowledge that there's people not only on the call who regularly are assisting folks with applying for disability benefits, but also there are people on the call who are going to be using this information in their own lives, for their own selves, for their own families. So want to just acknowledge that there are a lot of knowledge holders here, that I'm not a person holding all of the expertise, but I'm so happy to share what I have with you. Let's talk about our goals for today and what this webinar is going to accomplish. First, I want to make sure that folks understand the basics of some different disability benefits programs. And this is a California-specific webinar. And this information is current as of May 8th, 2020. Laws are often changing, so it's really important to make sure that you're consulting with someone about the current law if you're watching this into the future. So we want to understand the basics of these different programs, what they are, where they come from, what agencies you have to navigate to get them, who qualifies, how to apply, and what to do if you're denied. And those programs we're going to discuss are state disability insurance, or SDI, Social Security disability programs. I'm talking specifically about SSDI and SSI. There are other Social Security benefits out there, like retirement, survivors, things like that, but we're going to focus on the disability benefits today, SSDI and SSI. And I want to tell you about a program that not a lot of people know about, CAPI, the Cash Assistance Program for Immigrants. It's a California-specific program for folks who would otherwise qualify for Social Security disability, but just due to their immigration status, they're not able to qualify. I've built in time for you to ask questions after each section, after the SDI section, after the Social Security section, and after the CAPI section. So as questions come up for you, I encourage you to put those in the chat as soon as those questions arise for you. Another of our goals today is to understand how providers can assist individuals who are seeking these benefits. So I know that there are a ton of providers on the phone, or excuse me, on the webinar now, and I want to help you to, maximize our impact, to make sure that we're reaching as many folks as possible, and understand how each of us has an important role to play in helping people access benefits. And before we get any further, I just want to start off on a really important note, which is to say that families who are seeking these benefits are really struggling financially. They may be unable to work because they have to be home and taking care of themselves or taking care of a child. And there's sometimes this perception or judgment that parents seeking disability benefits for themselves or for their kids are trying to work the system or get something that they're not entitled to. That has not been my experience at all doing this work. My colleagues doing this work for decades, that has not been our experience. These programs pay very little, and it is really hard to afford basic necessities, even with these programs. So, people who are trying to access them really, really need them. I think that I'm speaking to the choir, but just want to make it clear that's where I'm coming from. And again, as part of an acknowledgement of all the folks who are present in this space, I want to talk about a pre-webinar survey that a lot of you folks filled out. About 53 people were able to respond to our survey to talk about what we already know. So thank you so much for folks who had the time and were able to make the time to complete that survey. It was really helpful to me. We asked, how often do you work with community members who could benefit from information about disability benefits programs, or do you need the information for yourself? And more than half of people who responded said that they either spend 50%, more than 50% of their time at their job helping people who need these benefits, or that they need this information for themselves. So again, there's folks who are grappling with these things every day and are experts in their own right. And here are some of the themes that came out of the survey. Folks are aware that generally there are temporary programs, programs that will help give you payments for just a shorter amount of time. And then there are more long-term programs. So we're going to talk about the differences. Folks generally also express knowledge that, advocacy is really different if you're trying to help a child get SSI versus an adult get access to a disability benefits program. There are different rules. And so I'm going to talk about those specifically in relation to Social Security and SSI. A lot of people acknowledged that immigration status has a big impact on what you're eligible for. So I'm going to make sure that I mention for each program considerations to be thinking about in terms of immigration status of the person who's applying. And a lot of people know, there's a lot of providers on this call, and a lot of people acknowledge, it's really helpful to have the support of healthcare providers in applying for disability benefits. It's something that I would say you absolutely cannot do without. It's so important to have a helpful and supportive healthcare provider in your life. And to the extent that folks are not healthcare providers and can assist people in getting into relationship with a healthcare provider they trust, that is invaluable. And another huge theme that we're going to see today, and something people already come in knowing, is that applying for disability benefits is not an easy process, and it's really lengthy. And so just having that expectation is really important. And in particular, this applies to Social Security disability. It's a more long-term program, and so they really have very strenuous rules. So these are the things we know. These are some of the themes. I'm going to jump right into talking about our first program, which is State Disability Insurance, or SDI. So this is a California-specific program. Yay. It's nice to live in a state that tries to take care of folks. There's a lot of problems we have. We can be doing a lot better, and I'm really grateful that this program exists. So this is a California state benefit. It's administered through the California agency called the Employment Development Department, or EDD. So you're going to hear me refer to them. And SDI is a temporary replacement for people's wages, just partially, up to a certain percentage, for folks who are unable to work their regular job activities due to a physical or mental illness or injury. SDI will pay you about 60 or 70% of your pre-disability earnings, and then there's a maximum. So I have the maximum here for 2020. It's $1,300 a week. As I mentioned, this is a temporary disability benefits program. So people can get these benefits for 52 weeks maximum. It's about a year, and you get your payments paid to you twice a month. So in the middle of the month, at the end of the month. And in order to be eligible for SDI, a person must have paid into the state SDI fund through their paycheck. If you look at your pay stub, if you're trying to help someone figure out if they're eligible for SDI, you check out the pay stub and see if there's been a deduction for, and it might say CA SDI. That's a good sign that they've been paying in. Not only do you have to have paid in to the SDI fund, you also had to have done so fairly recently, because when they're determining how much you get paid out for SDI, they're looking at what's called this base period of earnings. That's about 5 to 18 months in the past. So you have to have been working pretty recently in order to get SDI. And I'll make a note here, and I'm going to talk about it later as well, that this is really important to know, that it's just, the fact of paying in is what makes you eligible, in addition to the physical, mental illness, or injury. And so folks who are undocumented actually can also access SDI as long as they paid in. So I'm going to talk about more about that in a minute. I want to talk to you, I want to give you some practical tips about how to apply for SDI. So you know a little bit about, okay, so this is something for folks who've been working, who've been paying into it. It's temporary. It's something that you have to show some kind of medical or mental illness or injury. And you have to apply. We would advise you to apply as soon as possible. The deadline to apply is you have to apply within 49 days of the first day that you were unable to work due to something medical or due to mental health. You can apply after 49 days, but you have to show good cause. What that means is that you have to give them a good reason why you're applying a little bit late. And that can look lots of ways. That can be because of a language barrier. That can be because of whatever you're experiencing with your medical condition or your mental health. But you want to give a lot more detail about how that's impacting you. It could be because you're hospitalized. It could be because you didn't know about the program and you just consulted with an attorney and you just found out about it. Throw everything at it that'll stick. You have to sort of submit this along with your application to get them to consider it. And you want to put everything in that you feel like would be relevant and say something like, if you determine that this application is late, you don't have to admit it, then here's the reasons why, and explain why. And you're going to have a harder time establishing good cause the farther out you wait. So a year from the 49 days, not looking good. But a few days late, a few weeks late, it's a smaller barrier. You can apply online. This is a great way to do it. And you can also apply by mail on a piece of paper. They have a specific form. And so I've included the website where you can get this form. This form is also available at some medical offices. So if you feel like you might be eligible, ask your doctor's office if they have this form already, and that'll save you some trouble. You can also request the form by phone. Just a note about accessibility of these options, and especially during COVID-19. Phone lines are overwhelmed. The EDD is absolutely overwhelmed with applications, and so it's really tough to get through on the phone. I would really encourage folks, if possible, to try to apply online. And if you're a service provider, to help folks apply online, because we know that internet is not accessible to as many people as it should be. It's not treated as a utility, and really should be. So it's really hard for folks to access that. So if we can help people do that, that's so useful, because you can create an account online and then be able to check the status of your claim and check your claim related documents and it's just really great to have this place where all of your documents live and you can figure out what's going on with your case. So as I mentioned earlier, immigration status is not a barrier to applying for SDI. You just have to have paid into SDI. And the application actually has a space for you to list another social security number. So there's a space to list your own social security number. If you've not been working under your own social security number and you've been working under someone else's, you can list that person's under other social security number. And that is not to have any negative ramifications on people's ability to live safely. So, they're not, the EDD is not contacting, immigration authorities when they see this. The only potential trouble that we're aware of is that when two people have been using the same social security number, you then have to figure out who paid what into the fund, but that's possible, totally possible to do. Something else to know about the application is that you have to have a medical certification. You actually have to have something from your medical provider saying, yes, this person cannot work because of a medical or mental health condition. And because the benefits can be paid up to a year, it's so helpful and supportive if medical providers are willing to write that it's going to be about a year that the person can't work, because that means that they can access their full benefits. And if they actually, recover and are able to go back to work, that's great. But if they're not, then, just going ahead and certifying them for a year means they don't have to keep going back over and over to their doctor to say, look, I still can't work. Can you please help me make sure that I can afford basic necessities? If someone is denied their application, what do you do? It's really important to know what to do in that situation too, because not everybody is approved. If that happens, EDD actually sends people a notice in the mail of the determination in their case. And along with that, they send you an appeal form. It's actually really convenient and amazing. You do have to appeal within 30 days of the date on the notice. And again, if you're late, you have to show good cause, not just cause, really good cause for being late. So it's so important not to miss deadlines. This is actually a pretty tight deadline compared to others. So don't miss it. And as a provider, help make sure people don't miss that deadline. I want to also make sure to talk about just some different changes that have been happening because of COVID-19. So changes in the law. People are eligible for SDI if they have been diagnosed with COVID-19 or if they've just been exposed. That's it. You need a medical certification to say that that's the case, but that opens things up for a lot of folks, I think, in this time that can really use it. You can get your medical certification. You don't necessarily have to go in person to the doctor. You can get it via sort of a telehealth conference. And another thing that's really helpful about this time is that typically with SDI, there's a week. The first week that you're unable to work, EDD says, we're not paying you for that week. But with these new rules around COVID-19, if you're applying because you've been diagnosed with COVID-19 or you have been exposed, then that 1 week waiting period is not a waiting period anymore. You're entitled to pay for that time. So that's a really awesome change. This is, I could go into so much more depth. I also want to make sure that I'm stopping to answer any questions that people have. So Beth, if you could help me out and let me know if folks have questions about this first section, SDI.
Okay, let's see. There have not been too many questions yet, so I would invite people, if you do have a question at this time, to put it in the chat box. But I think people are mostly looking forward to getting a copy of the webinar so they can kind of refer other people to it as well. So,
oh my gosh, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, so yes, the slides yes, we will also send you a copy of the slides. Someone is asking, is the waiting period waived, only apply to COVID-19 related disability right now?
Yes, that's my reading of the law, that unfortunately other folks still have to wait that 1 week before EDD says you are entitled to benefits. benefits.
Okay. And how long can someone receive SDI benefits?
Up to about a year, 52 weeks. And so that's the maximum. Even if you're unable to work after that point, SDI, the fund, has run out. And so SDI is often a sort of stopgap for folks who, if you're thinking that your condition might be more long-term and that your ability to work is impacted, on a much more long-term situation than just a year, it's so important and helpful to, while you're on SDI, make sure you're applying for other more long-term benefits programs, because SDI will not continue indefinitely, just for a year.
Okay. And is the information on SDI in Spanish? Do they have it? Can you find it in Spanish?
So they do have the application in Spanish.
Okay.
And, I'd have to check the website to see how much detail they go into in Spanish.
Okay.
The website is mostly in English, and so not very helpful. Legal Aid at Work is an amazing sister organization, and I have their referral information at the end of this slide deck for folks. They're an organization that can help folks with accessing SDI or answering questions about it and help people navigate it. And they have bilingual folks on their staff.
Great.
To the extent that folks are not able to find the resources that they need, that's an amazing resource.
What if a person needs to take time off to care for someone with COVID-19? Does that 1 week, so can they do that? And then does the 1 week waiting period still apply, or is it waived? And what is the reason for the 1 week waiting period?
So if you're work to care for somebody else, that's actually a different program from SDI. SDI is only something that folks take when the person who's working themselves, when that person is unable to work because of a disability. There is a program that is sort of part of SDI that's called paid family leave. And that program allows people to be able to take time off to care for a loved one or for bonding with an infant. And so there are programs that are available, and there are more, the law is changing rapidly in this area. So in addition to paid family leave, there's other options as well that unfortunately we don't have time to cover today, just because they're not specifically, someone has become disabled and unable to work, and that person is the one applying. The reason for the 1 week waiting period, that's a really good question. That's something I want to research. In my mind, what I tell myself is that they're sort of saying, well, let's make sure that this is really serious. We really don't want to pay you your own money that you paid. So, for this first week, okay, that's just, wage loss. That's something maybe you can cover with paid time off or something like that. And we're just going to make sure. But that's something I want to research. That's just sort of my thinking about how the government operates in general.
Yeah, and some people are asking about the coverage for COVID-19 for people that are being called back to work, but have young children who are not in school and to care for them. And I think that question we do have on our YouTube channel. We can send it out again, a link to the training we did a few weeks ago that was on this topic, COVID-19 and unemployment. So we can send that out to people as well, a link to that. And then someone has asked about exposure. How does one certify that they may have been exposed to COVID-19? And I'm not sure I understand that question, but I'm sure, I would imagine it's something from a physician.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's, as part of the SDI application, there's about a page or two that the physician fills out to say, yes, this person is unable to work because of this thing. And so it's so important, like I was talking about, to have that relationship with a healthcare provider. That I know this is, a great privilege and not something that a lot of people enjoy or that everyone enjoys, but to be able to talk to your doctor to say, hey, I'm applying for this because of this situation. Here's who it is in my, immediate family, colleagues, whoever, who actually has COVID-19. And here's, the close proximity that I was into them, here's, maybe like if the person is symptomatic at all, to say, that I've been symptomatic in these ways, I've had this and this symptoms. Would you please certify, to tell them that I've been exposed? And it's really just about getting your doctor to write it down on a piece of paper. There doesn't need to be extensive like medical records about it, you going through elaborate lengths to prove it. If you've got your doctor who's able to just be like, yes, that's the case, and that's what they see and that's what they look at.
Great. And someone else, one more question, asked about self-employed workers. Can they receive SDI?
Great question. So if you have paid in as a self-employed worker, then yes. And the tricky thing is that a lot of people who are self-employed don't realize that you have this option to pay in to the fund. And so they don't set that up with EDD. And if you don't set it up, then unfortunately you haven't been paying into the fund and you're not eligible to collect from it. But if you're self-employed, you absolutely have the right to pay into that fund, and you absolutely have the right to apply for it if you're unable to work.
Great. I think we've covered pretty much all of them. So
beautiful. Well, I'll keep going. And if there are more questions, there may be time at the end. And also, folks, I just want you to know that if you're asking a question now that we're not able to get to, I am committed to making sure that I write out answers to questions after this webinar. And so I want to make sure that, all questions possible can be answered, even if they can't be answered in this space. And Beth and Leo will help me make sure that we send out the responses to questions we couldn't answer now.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, onward. Social Security. So this is a long section because it is very complicated. There are different types of programs. There are differences in eligibility for children and adults. So bear with me. I know it's a lot, and there will probably be a lot of questions, which is great too. I want to, help people understand as best as possible. All right, Social Security. So we talked about SDI, that's a temporary program. That's a California state program. Now we're talking about a long-term disability program. That's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this webinar, long-term disability. Social Security, as a lot of folks know, is a federal program. And so this is something that you have to go through the federal Social Security Administration to get. There are two main types of Social Security disability, and so those are the ones I'm going to tackle today. I'm not going to, talk about retirement, survivors, widows, widowers benefits, auxiliary. So I'm going to talk about SSDI, as it's known, and SSI. All right. So a major way to distinguish between the two is that SSDI, the disability insurance, is what someone has paid into over their work history. You have to have worked 40 quarters paying in to your Social Security taxes. 40 quarters, that's approximately 10 years of paying in. So this is available only to folks who have that work history. And because it's something that you've paid into, the rate that people get differs. It's individual to individual based on what you paid in. And it can often be more than SSI. So this is a great benefit to have if you're able to pay in, and not everybody's employer does, and so it's important to know. It's usually paid on the third day of the month or later. So if someone comes to you and they're telling you, oh, I'm on Social Security, and you're trying to figure out which program it is, it's a good hint. If it's not paid on the first of the month, then it's probably not, it's not SSI, it's something else. So paid on the third of the month or later, SSDI. It covers disabled adults under age 65 that made those payments through their federal income tax. And you can get Medicare with SSDI after 29 months from the date that Social Security acknowledges that you became disabled. So not from the date that they decided you were disabled, which can often be longer, in the process, but from the date of your disability, 29 months from there, you're eligible for Medicare, which is amazing, especially if you have Medi-Cal and Medicare together. Ooh, it is such a beautiful combo. So it's a great thing to have. And then just a quick note for folks who know of parents who are getting SSDI or know of, a situation where a child is maybe needing some support and their parent might have worked and paid into SSDI. There are benefits available. They're not called SSDI, but they're called more survivors auxiliary benefits for dependent children of disabled or deceased adults based on that adult's work history. So that's just like a little bonus to know about. That's a bump that a dependent child can enjoy just based on an adult's work history. So SSDI, separate program from SSI. They have lots of differences. SSI is paid on the first of the month. It's considered a benefit that is just about financial necessity. They pay it on the first so you can pay your bills. No work history is required. You don't have to show any work history for SSI, but you do have to show financial need. So you can't earn very much while you're on SSI. If you're getting other income, Social Security takes that into account and reduces your SSI check pretty much immediately as soon as you start getting any other money in. So you have to show that you have a very low or no income. You also have to show that you don't have much resources or assets. And that's just a fancy legal word for, do you have money in the bank? Do you have money in cash? Do you have money wherever? Do you have money, in savings, stocks and bonds, which is almost, nobody who's actually interested in this. But they want to make sure you're under a certain limit. For individuals, that limit is $2,000. For couples on SSI, that limit is $3,000. SSI is available to both adults and children. So I'm going to get more into the nitty-gritty rules of the differences between what adults have to show versus what children have to show. And SSI comes with full scope Medi-Cal, so the state Medicaid program. And that SSI Medi-Cal has no share of cost. So you don't have to pay something in order for your Medi-Cal to kick in. It should cover what you need. SSI and SSDI are, this is a good opportunity to point out sort of a philosophy behind benefits. And that philosophy is, who's deserving? Who really deserves these benefits, which is a very wrong-headed way to think about it. In my opinion, I think that, if people need necessities, then that's what they need. But SSDI, there's this attitude sort of like, well, you paid in, it's yours, you deserve this. And so there are lots of rules that are a lot more flexible for folks on SSDI, especially about going back to work. So just heads up about that. Whereas the criteria for showing that you're maintaining eligibility for SSI, they are so strict about it. I want to talk to you about, what to expect when someone's on SSDI and SSI in terms of what they may be able to receive. And so let's talk about the rates. SSDI has a maximum, but the average as of January of this year was $1,258 a month. And so you can just look at the SSI rates right below that and see that that's generally more. People are generally going to get more on SSDI. If you would actually get less by collecting SSDI, just totally based on your work history and what you paid in, then they'll actually supplement your SSDI with a little bump of SSI just to get you up to the maximum SSI. So people can actually be getting both benefits at the same time if their SSDI is very little. So SSDI depends on your work history. No one can tell you exactly what that number is, except you and Social Security sort of like agreeing on what you paid in. SSI has variable rates depending on what your situation is. So in California, again, these are all California specific numbers for SSI because California is a little different and gives people a little bit more. I'm very thankful for that. $943.72 is the amount that most people are getting in 2020. There's a cost of living adjustment every year, so it goes up a little bit every year, and this is what it is for this year. If the person is living rent-free, though, then they get a reduced rate. Versus if they're homeless and they don't have cooking facilities, they actually get a bump. And you're probably smart enough listening to this to think, how many times is someone homeless that they're saying they're living rent-free and actually Social Security is giving someone less than what they should be giving. So if you yourself, or if you know of somebody who is getting, a very small amount of SSI, it's worth investigating why that's happening and making sure that Social Security has the right information. If the person is homeless and doesn't have cooking facilities, they should be getting more. It shouldn't be a situation where, oh, you don't have rent to pay, so we're just going to pay you less. Also, if a person is in a licensed facility or living in a relative's household, there's an additional bump in SSI for folks. And so these are the adult numbers. SSI for children has different numbers. So there's different programs, different criteria, different numbers. 848.15 is the amount most people are getting. It's sort of the max for 2020 if the child is living with parents or relatives. If they're not living with parents or relatives, then they actually get less SSI. I think the thinking is that there are other programs that are supposed to be helping support that household, and so you can be getting multiple programs. Let's talk about the application. All right, we talked a little bit about the difference in the programs. Let's talk about how you actually access these programs. You can call Social Security. This is the national phone number. So you can call them, you can say, I want to apply for SSDI and SSI. If you think there's even a chance that you have a work history enough to get SSDI, go ahead and tell them you want to apply for that too. And if they find out you don't, then that's okay. You're denied, and at least your application will go on for SSI. You just need to tell them you want to apply for both. Just call them up, say, I want to apply for this. If you want to schedule a time to apply for it, you can say, can I schedule a time, in the future I can apply. You can also apply online. And for similar reasons we talked about with SDI, it's helpful to apply online because the volume of people doing it, doesn't create barriers for folks who are trying to apply, whereas the phone might be overwhelmed. So applying online is really helpful. And just as an aside, from my practice of Social Security disability law, doing things online, there's so much less chance of human error, I have found, on the part of the Social Security office. Like, suddenly they don't lose your appeals. Suddenly they, actually keep track of them and actually process them. So again, for providers who can help people access the application online and help them access an account online, that's so valuable. SSI applications, I just want to be really clear, because these are need-based, SSI is a need-based program. First, before they look at anything else in your application, they're going to make sure that you're financially eligible. If your income is too high, if your resources or assets are too high, that's it. They won't even look at your medical condition. They're just like, no, we're not giving you this. So it's the first hurdle. Immigration status, this is a theme that's going to come up again and again. This has an impact on your eligibility. For SSDI, people who are assigned a Social Security number and have legally worked in the US, they're legally working in the US, they're legally present in the US, or they're a citizen abroad, that's all you got to show. You got to show I paid in, I'm legal, that's it. So this is one of those ways that they're showing, who they think is deserving. It's kind of a lower bar for proving that you're the correct immigration status for SSDI. Whereas SSI, you have to reside in the US and be, quote, a qualified immigrant. And so this is a detailed category of, it's basically most helpful to look at the list while you're talking to the person who's applying to see if they fit within one of the categories. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but just know that it's a smaller list of folks who are eligible for SSI. And then folks who are not eligible for SSI can apply for CAPI in California. So I'll talk about that later. And that's for folks who are just ineligible based on immigration status. All right. And a person can also be granted presumptive benefits at an early stage of the application process if they meet specific medical criteria. Presumptive benefits will mean that you get paid for up to 6 months while a decision is reached on your application. And then there are different criteria for children and adults for what qualifies for presumptive benefits. And then I would be remiss not to mention updates based on COVID-19. Social Security field offices are closed during this time to protect workers, to protect the community. So many people go into Social Security offices to get things done that this is a real barrier to folks. And so using the phone, using the internet, and then if you're fearless, if you're courageous, using the mail, because then you don't have any proof that your mail got through, and it's easy for them to claim that it was lost. So by phone, online, and then just documenting everything is really important for folks right now, but I've had an amazing success, at least just getting through to Social Security folks on the phone. Let's talk about the disability process. So I talked about presumptive benefits to give you all a little preview of, how helpful it is to start getting paid right away, because the process is a lengthy one and most people are not approved at the initial stage. You can see that only about a third of people are approved at the initial application phase. If you apply and then you get a notice that says, yeah, we think you can work, we think you're not disabled, you can file the first level appeal, which is called a request for reconsideration. And that's basically a rubber stamping phase where Social Security says, yeah, we agree with the decision we made earlier. So most people are denied at that first appeal level. And it isn't until people appeal again, that second appeal, and request a hearing by an administrative law judge. It's usually not until that hearing that people are approved. That's where most people are approved in the process. So you have to hang in there. You have to hang in there. If you go away with nothing else from this presentation, please know that most people's initial applications are denied. That is not an indication that that person is not disabled. That is not what that means. That just means that it's Social Security's process and only the strong will survive. So you just have to keep appealing, have to keep following it through. Don't miss your deadlines. And if you're a service provider, the extent that you can encourage and support people and making sure they meet their deadlines so that they're not filing application after application after application and waiting a year after the last application to file a new one, that just stretches out their wait for benefits. Right now, what I'm seeing is in Alameda County, it's taking about a year and a half from initial application to ALJ hearing, administrative law judge hearing. And then you have to wait for the decision after that. So that's about 3 to 6 months to wait for a decision after that. And it can be longer, excuse me. Even after the administrative law judge level, you can also appeal if you don't agree with what the judge said. You can go to the Appeals Council, which is actually Social Security's own decision-making body. So, you're not going to have a great chance there. If you go to the Appeals Council, you might as well expect that you have to go to the U.S. District Court after that, because that's where you're way more likely to get the case, handed back to the ALJ with instructions to say, yeah, do it right this time, ALJ. So that's just a preview of what the process looks like. And please be encouraged or encourage other folks. Just keep moving with that process. Don't stop. I want to talk about the legal definition of disability, and this is different for adults versus children. Disability doesn't just mean your doctor says, this person's disabled. That's not enough. There's specific definition that I'll go into. Social Security relies on people's medical records, and in the case of children, they rely on school records to determine if someone is disabled. So they're not just going to listen to the person, their family. They need medical evidence. They need medical records. And if there's not enough evidence, or if it's not all completely consistent, all saying exactly the same thing, Social Security will actually make the person who's applying go to their own doctor paid by Social Security. Sorry, when I say their own doctor, I mean Social Security's doctor, not your doctor. And these people meet with you for like 15 or 30 minutes and then, give their opinion, and it's usually not favorable. So it's so important to be getting the healthcare that you need from every specialist you could be seeing, everyone that you need to see, so that you have a wealth of medical documentation about what your experience is. And Social Security is not just looking at this review by a doctor who met with you for 15 minutes. So let's talk about, I said, disability has a legal definition, it's a legal term. The definition is the same for both SSDI and SSI. So it's the disability determination process about like medical disability is really sort of the same process. Disability means the inability to do any substantial gainful activity by reason of any medically determinable physical or mental impairment, which has lasted or can be expected to last for a continuous period of not less than 12 months or result in death. Cannot engage in substantial gainful activity. What does that mean? This is not accessible language. No one is meant to understand this. Each of these words has a definition, and I'm going to go into that more. But what this means, basically, is that someone can't work because of a medical or mental health condition. So I'm going to go into, more into what this means. For adults, there is a 5-step sequential evaluation process to determine if you can work or if you're prevented from working based on a medical or mental health condition. Step 1, are you working? Are you engaged in substantial gainful activity? What substantial gainful activity means is it's actually a number. It's set every year. And if you're earning that much gross before taxes, before deductions, then that's it. You're earning SGA, and Social Security is not interested. They're like, no, you're not disabled. Just the fact that you can earn this much is enough. Your case stops there. That's it. So it's really hard to get Social Security when you're working. It's a harder argument. Step 2 is, do you have a severe impairment? And I want to pause and acknowledge Social Security's language is not the language of disability justice. It's really kind of gross, offensive language. A severe impairment. Are you impaired? This is not the way we need to talk about humans, and so I just want to really acknowledge that. So I'm going to talk more about what severe impairment means. Step 3 is, okay, if you made it past step 1 and 2, do you have a condition that meets or equals a listing? What is a listing? Social Security actually keeps a list of conditions that are very detailed. And if you fit within one of the definitions on the list, then that's it. They find you disabled, but it's a high bar. I'm going to give you some examples of listings later so you can look at what Social Security is looking at. And it's all available online, so you can have a look ahead of time in your own case. Step 4 and 5 are actually related. So again, Social Security's analysis is heavy on can you work and to what extent. So step 4 and 5 are, can you return to previous work you did? Or can you do any type of work, whether or not you've ever done it in your life? Can you do anything? And they have a very old, outdated way of looking at it. They have like a list from like the 70s or 80s of job descriptions that I'm sure don't even exist anymore, like button polisher. And they're like, if you can be a button polisher, that's all. So it's quite a gauntlet to go through this 5-step process for adults. Substantial gainful activity in step 1, I mentioned, is a specific number. In 2020, it's gross income of $1,260 a month. If you're doing that, and you're doing it in a way where you're working, substantially. So what that means is that you're not in like a rehabilitation work setting, like you don't have a lot of supports around you to help you do what you're doing. If those supports were removed, you would not be able to work. That sort of sheltered work environment is not what they're talking about when they're talking about substantial work. They're saying, do you go into work? Do you have to report to the employer? Do you have to be held to the same standard of everyone else working? Or do you get like any supports or things that if taken away, you would not be able to work in a job in the economy? Severe impairment. So you have to have, again, you have to have your medical evidence, have to have medical records showing that you have had this condition and that significantly limits your ability to work. And significantly, right, it's a wiggly word. Let me talk about what basic work abilities are so you can sort of get a sense of like what it means when something limits your basic work activity. So basic work activities include walking, standing, sitting, lifting, pushing, pulling, reaching, carrying, handling, climbing stairs, climbing ladders, seeing, hearing, speaking. Also mental basic activities. So understanding, carrying out and remembering instructions, responding appropriately to supervisors, coworkers, work situations, dealing with changes in a routine work setting. If all of your conditions and symptoms combined make it so that any of those abilities are significantly diminished, then you have a severe impairment. So step 1 and step 2 are actually, often are some of the easier steps to get through as long as you're not working, and it really gets a lot harder in step 3, etc. So step 3, do you meet a listing? The listings, like I said, describe conditions that Social Security thinks are severe enough that they will not even look anymore in. If they think that you meet a listing, that's good enough for them, but it's hard to meet a listing. If you don't meet a listing, you can also argue that you equal a listing. So I'm very, very, very close to this listing. I'm just not exactly it, but you have to be very, very close to it. I want to talk a little bit about, let me give you some examples of the listings just to make it more concrete. So listings are organized according to body system. So you see, respiratory disorders, digestive system issues, cancer, immune system disorders for folks living with HIV, mental health disorders, it's all different categories. And the listings can be found online. So you can just type in SSA listings and it'll bring you right to where you want to go. There are different listings for children versus adults in recognition that some diseases and conditions affect only children or affect children differently. So what you see on the screen right now is adult listings. If you look on sort of the left of my screen capture, let me use my laser pointer. There are childhood listings. So adult listings are part A, there are childhood listings that are part B. And so you look at both of those for children, and for adults, this is just the only list there is. To go a little bit deeper into the examples, I took some examples that I have used in real life cases. So this is one of these listings in purple is the listing for depressive, bipolar, and related disorders. Look at how detailed that listing is. So seriously, no wonder Social Security will just be like, okay, that's enough. If you've shown this, that's enough, because it's quite a lot you have to show. So for example, medical documentation of depressive disorder characterized by 5 or more of the following symptoms: depressed mood, diminished interest in activities, appetite disturbance, sleep disturbance, decreased energy, on and on and on. So having to show medical records saying consistently that you've been experiencing at least 5 of these things. And if you notice, here we go, there's a little and here, you have to show extreme limitation or marked limitation of some of the next list of things. And it's those basic work-related activities we talked about: understanding, remembering, or applying information, interacting with others, concentrating, adapting or managing yourself. And then if you don't have that, then you have to show basically at least 2 years of medical evidence of, getting treatment and it not helping you to be able to adjust and be able to go back to work. Who has that kind of access to mental health care? Not a lot of people, almost no one. So this is a really high bar to hit. And it's really hard to argue you meet a listing. I wanted to also give you all in green an example of a physical medical listing. So I went with the HIV listing, and you notice that I just included H, but there's A through G even before that, and there's even an I after that. So this is just one thing that you can show and meet the listing to show my HIV means that I am disabled and unable to work. And notice how detailed this is. Complications of HIV infection requiring at least 3 hospitalizations within a 12-month period, at least 30 days apart, lasting at least 48 hours. That's a lot. That's a lot to show. And this is one that I've successfully used and equals the listing argument when I worked with a person who didn't have 3 hospitalizations within a 12-month period, but she had 2 hospitalizations and she had multiple admissions to a skilled nursing facility within a 12-month period that all lasted more than 48 hours. And Social Security agreed that that equaled the listing, even though it didn't meet the listing. So that's an example of sort of how to use the equals and meet the listing arguments and why the listings are so detailed and difficult to meet. Steps 4 and 5, if you can't show that you meet a listing, and it's really hard to do, then the Social Security turns and they want to see, okay, well, what's the minimum amount of work that you could do? What is your minimum functionality or residual functional capacity? Physically, can you do sedentary work? Because if you can do anything, you can be a button polisher, then that's it. If you can do anything like that, then that's enough. You're not disabled. And then they're also looking at mental residual functional capacity. Can you meet the basic mental demands of work, which we talked about earlier, sort of responding to supervisors, taking instructions, managing oneself and one's emotions. So that is what the 5-step process looks like for adults. For kids, it is a different process. It's a 3-step sequential process. And want to be clear that, again, because we're talking about SSI, because this is children, SSI rules apply, and the first thing they do is screen for financial eligibility, and they're going to look at the parent's income and the assets rather than just the child's. So just know that that's the very first bar before you can get into the 3 steps. Step 1, very similar, we've seen this before, is the child performing SGA. That's probably only going to be an issue with older youth. Step 2, does the child have a severe impairment? So this is actually, usually not a very hard bar to get past. Is the child significantly affected by all of their conditions and symptoms taken together? Step 3 is where things get different and interesting. Does the child's impairment meet a listing? All right, so we know a little bit about the listings. Does it equal a listing? We talked about how to show equaling a listing. Or does it functionally equal the listings? Well, what the heck does that mean? Functional domains have been created by Social Security to say if a child has limitations in any of these domains, if it's an extreme limitation in one, or if it's a marked limitation in 2, then Social Security considers you disabled. So I'm going to quickly go through and sort of talk about what these mean. Acquiring and using information, the child's ability to learn in an age-appropriate manner. This domain includes IQ scores, achievement test scores, and the child's ability to communicate. So any evidence about that. Attending and completing tasks means just the ability to maintain attention and concentration necessary to complete things in a timely manner. Can the child interact with others appropriately? So responding appropriately to adults and authorities, to peers, to friends. Does the child have, exhibit extreme behaviors, or is the child extremely shy? That's all evidence that's relevant. Moving about and manipulating objects. So that includes the child's fine motor skills and gross motor skills. So fine motor skills like writing, using scissors, buttoning your buttons. Gross motor skills like walking, running, other sports skills. Caring for yourself, your ability to dress, to bathe, to, practice hygiene, brush your teeth, use utensils appropriately, avoid dangerous situations. Don't put yourself in a situation where you're going to be in danger. And then health and physical well-being. So where a child has a chronic condition that shows that there's periods of that condition being exacerbated where it's worse. And that means that the child is then unable during those really difficult periods to, go to school, to do their regular work, then they have a limitation in the 6th domain. As I mentioned, a child has to have a marked degree of impairment. So they say limitation in at least 2 of the 6 or an extreme limitation in 1 of the 6. This is why they have judges doing these cases, because the words marked and extreme, what the heck do those mean? They're very wiggly. These are not words that there, isn't obvious like, oh, well, this must be extreme and this must be marked. Extreme just means very serious interference or inability to do something. Marked means serious limitation in doing something. And so a judge's discretion about what is serious and what is extreme is something that is really relied on in these cases. So it's obvious at this point, I think, how important medical and mental health providers are to this process. It's their documentation that Social Security is looking at. They're not just hearing a child, they're not just hearing an adult and saying, you know what, yeah, we believe you. They are looking at some extrinsic, some external evidence. And so the fact that medical providers create that gives them great power in these cases. And with great power comes great responsibility, right? The Spider-Man principle. If providers enter detailed notes into their patient's chart, documenting every symptom and the way that those symptoms limit the person, that is so helpful. That's so helpful to do. If doctors can refer people, or if medical practitioners can refer people to all the specialists they might need to see and make sure that that person is following up with those visits, that is critical. Because again, you can't show proof of extreme depression if you have no notes from a therapist. That's really tough. That's really tough for folks. If doctors can complete any questionnaires that Social Security sends to them, or if the attorney or the patient provides them any questionnaires, if they can complete those and discuss it even with their patient and say, hey, I got this questionnaire and it's saying all these different things. Like, I just want to have a conversation with you about it, just to make sure that they're doing it in a way that's supportive and they're not writing anything that is, not necessarily accurate from the person's perspective of their lived experience, or if they're writing something that actually looks, they're trying to be really positive. It's so important to emphasize the negative in these cases. That's a really hard thing, but it's really important for doctors to do. So the extent they can do that, or even submit a letter detailing someone's symptoms, their diagnoses, and importantly, the limitations that those create. It's not enough to just say, my patient is disabled. Disability is a legal term. Social Security has the right to determine that. But if the doctor can talk about what limitations the person has, that is so helpful to the Social Security Administration. And just so again, that last, just want to pump it up. Almost all Social Security, SSDI, SSI applications are going to be denied at the initial stage. And I just want to emphasize again how important it is to appeal, and help someone appeal, because it can be a long road from the initial application to the hearing. And people need encouragement to keep, their cases going. All right, let's see what questions there are, knowing that there's also a section on CAPI that I want to talk about as well, but let's pause for
Oh yeah, there are a lot of questions I have. So
give you homework for me.
Oh my gosh, yes. So way up at the top, there's questions about, people that have asked questions about individuals. Like I see one with a child, someone whose both parents have passed and the child is 14 years old. Will the child, so some of these real specific questions, I think, I'm sorry you all, but we will send links to how you can get in touch with the East Bay Community Law Center.
Or pass those on to me, Beth, if you don't mind also.
I will. We'll pass them on and we'll reply to them.
Thank you.
So they're asking about if people get denied, especially if a child gets denied, like you were saying, they appeal, but should they see another doctor? Should they, if they get denied after seeing the Social Security doctor, the SSI doctor, what do they do? How do they get the right documentation?
Yeah, it's really helpful to be in conversation with your medical providers.
So with the medical provider, the SSI medical provider, or your medical provider?
What I encourage people to do is you get a notice of when you have an appointment with a Social Security doctor. When you get that notice, it's helpful to go to where you actually get care, get your medical records, and bring them with you to that doctor. That doesn't necessarily guarantee they're going to see the light, but it does help them. Social Security says that they send people these records, but I don't know how true that is. So being your own strongest advocate, getting your own medical records, ordering them and reviewing them. And if you see problems in the records, like if you see the doctor reporting things in a way that is not accurate to you, or in the way that you feel like this, minimizes the situation, having a conversation with your doctor and saying, I'm sorry, I think maybe there's a misunderstanding, maybe there's a miscommunication, but I just want to be clear that these things, impact me in a very serious way. And here's the ways that, I might not tell you every time, but here's the situation. Also, just making sure that your medical record is as full and complete as possible, that you're not just relying on records from one doctor, that you're seeking referrals to different specialists, whoever you need, not just because, not for fun, but if you're not seeing an orthopedic specialist and you need to, and you just have been putting that off, no better time than the present while you're applying for Social Security disability. So be in conversation with your doctors to make sure that you're seeing your records, that it's all reflected accurately. The time when you would want to get like a second medical opinion is if your treating provider is really not, capturing what you're experiencing.
Okay, great. There were a number of questions about people who live with relatives, and why does living with a relative pay more? And do you have to be approved? And then there's another question about how do you qualify for Medicare if you're on SSDI? Isn't medical certification enough?
You don't even need medical certification. It's just the fact that you're on SSDI.
Yeah, then 29
After 29 months, exactly. It goes straight through, no matter how old you are.
Okay.
And why children get less when they don't live with relatives. So there's like supplementary benefits that folks can get, like fostering benefits and those sorts of things. And so my thinking is that Social Security is thinking, well, you're getting this, and so we're going to give you less.
How does one access the auxiliary or survivor's benefits?
Yeah, I would recommend calling that National Social Security number and saying, my parent, spouse, whoever it is, had a work history with Social Security and they passed away. Or they're currently disabled and on benefits, and I want to know if, I'm eligible for these benefits.
Right.
And you have to have that person's Social Security number and things like that so that they can look up the person's account.
Right. And if it's someone with a problem, they may ask for a death certificate and that kind of thing. So
Exactly, exactly.
if an individual receives SSI and Medicare, why do they not qualify for Medi-Cal? That's one question. Another one is about, can someone over 65 apply for SSDI or Social Security, SSI?
These are brilliant questions. I just love everyone. Thank you so much. These are brilliant questions, and thank you, Beth, for coordinating.
Sure.
All right, so the Medicare, Medi-Cal thing. All right, so if you're on Medicare and you often, people who are on Medicare, it's because they're on SSDI, and that actually like bumps them up. That gives them like usually a little bit more than you would be getting on SSI. And it bumps you up just enough that you're over the income limit for Medi-Cal. Thankfully, some amazing advocacy groups in California, including Justice and Aging and so many others, advocated to the state and have changed the law to get rid of what they call the senior penalty, where just because you're someone who's Medicare eligible, which means then you can't get Magi Medi-Cal, which has a higher income limit, that doesn't mean that someone should have less access to healthcare. That's ridiculous. And so that senior penalty is gone as of, my understanding is August 1st of this year. Medicare and SSDI are not things that should prevent you from being able to get full scope Medi-Cal. So that change is happening August. The other question, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Would you remind me the other question?
I'm trying to remember. I'm looking at the law, trying to find it. Let's see. Well, so they want to know the youngest a child can qualify for SSI, and I'm thinking that's newborn, right? Because
yes,
newborn. And I think you're not going to talk about this, but I'd also have people, if it's a child, to think about California CCS. Is another California Children's Services.
Yes, thank you.
And someone is asking, what if you still get denied with your records? Is SSDI the same as SSA? I mean, SSA is the Social Security Administration, right? And then
right.
SSDI is the thing.
Yeah, so there are many Social Security benefits. There's retirement that we haven't talked about. Oh, I think the question was about if you're 65, can you qualify for SSDI? So usually it depends on your full retirement age. So everyone's full retirement age is different based on the year you were born. You can actually just do a quick Google search and find on Social Security's webpage, like say, what's my retirement age? And they'll have a list of like years of birth, and they'll say, here's your full retirement age. If you are applying for SSDI or any kind of Social Security before you hit full retirement age, then yes, you can get SSDI. You can't get SSI because it's need-based, and so if they have this pot of money that they want to give you for early retirement, they're gonna make you take that instead of SSI. But with SSDI, you can opt for SSDI. Say, no, I do not want to pull my retirement early. When you start taking retirement early, you get a lower rate. And so it's way better to say, you know what, first give me SSDI, and then when I hit full retirement age, you can flip me over to retirement. And that means I have no penalty and I can get my full benefit amount. So yes, you can qualify for SSDI if you're 65, as long as your full retirement age is not 65.
Right. One more question, and then I will remind people that if we didn't get to your question, we are going to send these questions to Nora, and she's going to put them together in a letter or a piece of paper or a form that will be like an FAQ, and we'll sort of answer some of these questions. So someone asked, when you have a green card but it hasn't expired, how can a person apply for EDD? Do they apply on? I think they're asking if they can apply online.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And with applying for EDD, if you're talking about SDI, then immigration status does not matter as long as you paid into the SDI fund. So check your pay stubs to make sure you paid in. With unemployment benefits, immigration status does matter. And I'm sorry, I'm not up on. I think that LPR status is often a protected status. It's often one that makes people eligible for benefits. So there's a good chance that you're eligible, but I'm so sorry that I don't know off the top of my head.
That's okay. Let's continue on here, and please everyone know that we will do our best to get your question answered. Either maybe we'll have a little extra time at the end, or we will make a copy of them, like I said, and try to send that out to you all.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. I know we're like right up on the end of the webinar time. And so if folks have time to bear with me, I would love to tell you about CAPI, the Cash Assistance Program for Immigrants. It's specific to the state of California, and it's so, so important. So few people know about it. And what happens is people will go in and apply for SSI because they're unable to work because of a medical or mental health condition, and they're denied just based on their immigration status and don't realize that there's another option. Well, there is. It's CAPI. You have to be a resident of California. You have to meet the financial eligibility rules for SSI. So again, you have to have a really low income or no income, and then you have to meet that asset rule, $2,000 for an individual, $3,000 for a couple. You have to meet the Social Security disability rules. So you saw we went through the 5-step sequential evaluation process. We went through the 3-step process for children. And as long as you meet those rules, then they should approve you. And you have to show them, you know, I tried to apply for SSI, but they told me I couldn't get it just because of my immigration status. So getting a letter from Social Security saying, yeah, we will not approve this person because of their immigration status. Give that over to the state of California and say, I want CAPI instead, and then that'll help you out. I included the CAPI hotline on this slide in case folks want to learn more information. Just wanted to make sure you have that resource and want to make sure you know how to apply. So you can contact Alameda County Social Services Agency or your social services agency wherever you are in the state. This is the specific number and contact information for Alameda County. So you can call them or email them at clientconcern@acgov.org. One important note I want to make is that if you call them, CAPI is not a super well-known program. So if you ask them about it and they start saying, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, ask to speak with a supervisor. Just don't even waste your time. Just go to a supervisor. There's so many public benefits programs. There's so many eligibility rules. Workers just sometimes don't know them all. If they don't have personal experience with them, they might not remember. So talk to a supervisor if you get any guff.
And how does this CAPI program affect public charge, Nora? That was a good question.
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, that's such a good question. Let me make sure to, it totally depends on, you know, what someone's immigration status is. And what they're trying to adjust to. But because that's such a question to unpack, I want to respond to that in writing.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. And we are also, audience, we're having another training on immigration and programs. So you'll hear about that there too.
Absolutely. On June 16th, yeah, my colleague Daniel Fessler is going to give you all the deets, but I'm happy to also respond in writing. Another thing to know about if you try to apply for CAPI on the phone and they say just immediately, well, you're not eligible, don't take a no. You know, they have to take your application, and if they determine you're ineligible, then they have to give you notice in writing of why, and then you have the right to appeal it. So again, sometimes workers are just overwhelmed. They haven't memorized all of the eligibility criteria. Just because they think you're not eligible, don't take a no. Go ahead and ask them for the application anyway. Fill it out and put the burden on them to tell you why you're not eligible. And then maybe contact us if you need some help. Here's the process for if you're denied. You have 90 days from the date on the notice to request a hearing. They send you the appeal form with the notice, very convenient. Social Security does not do that. EDD does do that with SDI, but it's really helpful to have it in the mail. You just fill out that request for hearing. I'm going to show you in a couple slides what that looks like. Then you have a state ALJ hearing with an administrative law judge. And if you don't agree with what the judge said, then you can even request rehearing and even file a writ in Superior Court. So you do have options if they deny you. Much like with Social Security, don't stop if they tell you no. Keep appealing. There is a long process ahead of you to be able to right what they might have gotten wrong. Here's a little bit more information about filing an appeal. So you can do it by phone, which is really great. So you just call the State California Department of Social Services at the phone numbers here on this slide and say, I want to request an appeal. I got this notice. It says this date at the top. It says that I am ineligible for CAPI and I want to appeal. And, you know, it's always helpful to keep your record, write down what time you called, who you talked to, that sort of thing. And you can also mail your request for hearing to this address that's on this page. So check out this request for hearing form is available online. So there's a link, and I just wanted to show you what it looks like. This is the request for hearing form that they'll send you with any denial notice. Right here, I want to draw your attention. I want a hearing due to an action by the welfare department of blank county. So this is just a little tricky thing to know. Alameda County actually doesn't process CAPI. Like, they'll take your application, they'll send you an application, but they're not the decision makers. It's actually San Mateo County are the ones who make the decision. So just a little note that here in this box that's like, what county? It's actually San Mateo County, but it's okay if you don't remember that. They should still process your appeal and figure it out themselves. Just wanted to give that little helpful tip. And then that was my super quick and dirty overview of CAPI, just because we already went through the eligibility criteria when we talked about Social Security. I even have my notes here. I like printed out some like the regulations that tell me sort of who's eligible for CAPI. So quick list, if you're not eligible for SSI because you're under an order of supervision, because you are you have an application in for adjustment to lawful permanent resident status, because you've been granted a stay of deportation, because you have an indefinite voluntary departure and you're a non-citizen in the US, if you have deferred action status, if you've been granted an indefinite stay of deportation, and several more criteria. There are lots of different criteria for who qualifies, but it's a much broader list than SSI. So just wanted to give folks like a flavor of that, and see if we have time for any other questions, or if we should talk about, you know, where to go if you have questions beyond this. What do you think?
Okay, so we do have a little bit of time. Someone is asking, how long can one get CAPI and the amounts?
Yeah, CAPI is the same amount for SSI. And as long as, so this gets into a little bit more nitty gritty, which I'm happy to go into. With CAPI and with SSI and with SSDI, proving that you're disabled once typically is not enough. They want to know if your condition has changed. So every so often they might come back to you and say, hey, we need, you know, you to show us your medical records and make sure that you're still eligible for this. So as long as you keep filling out the, you know, renewal forms, and you keep cooperating with their process for them determining that you're still disabled, then you can continue getting CAPI. It's a long-term disability program like SSI. It's very similar to SSI, except that it applies to more folks based on immigration status. So it's the same amount as SSI, and it's sort of the same rules about keeping it.
Okay, someone is asking about programs that can assist families with the CAPI process.
Yes.
Long term.
Yeah, good question. So East Bay Community Law Center, where I work, we work on a lot of CAPI applications. We know that it's a sort of inaccessible process to folks, in part because I think their application, I'm not positive, I think their application is only in English, which is like,
yeah, that's a little weird.
One cannot know what the thinking was there, besides to say that perhaps there was none. And so EBCLC, you know, commonly works on these. I wonder if our friends at Bay Area Legal Aid and the Homeless Action Center also on these. Those would
for
be
sure. Yes. So you may have covered this, but if a child receives benefits, do they have to reapply when they become an adult?
There is a different, that's a good question. I love these questions.
And what is the age of adulthood? Is it 18 or 21?
People are 18. People are so knowledgeable, unless if you're in school, there's an argument that you do adult status a little bit later. But yeah, there's a different disability standard for adults, as we talked about. And so you have to prove that you're disabled by the adult standard in order to keep getting benefits as an adult.
Great. And what languages can your program assist in other than English?
We have Spanish speakers on the team, and we actually have interpreters I think that mom is one that's like a little harder to get an interpreter for, but we still have found interpreters. So I don't want to go out on a limb and say every language, but I do want to say that when I think about languages that we've had trouble getting interpreters for, we still were able to get interpreters. And so, you know, just working through that system is, I know that there are barriers to working with an interpreter. I know that's a really slow process. I know that takes patience and compassion, but we're willing to do it with folks. And so,
someone is asking.
Let me go back and just say,
sure,
for the adult child, you don't
Yes.
actually have to file a new application. You don't have to worry about that. Social Security will actually contact you and say, we're doing a review, you know, to get you in line with the adult standards and want to make sure that you meet the adult criteria. So you don't have to initiate that on your own. You don't have to open a new application.
Great. Do you know of any rent support currently due to COVID-19 that are in addition to SSDI?
Rent support, that's...
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, a place to go for that question would be HERA, Housing Economic Resource Advocates program that we will be having. They will be providing a training soon for us, but you can Google their program. They're in Alameda County, and they're an awesome program and can help you with anything around housing. They will have good access to that information.
There's also rent assistance through Catholic Charities, through Season of Sharing. And then if you're talking about just general programs, because, you know, SSDI is more like disability based and not strictly rent assistance, like Catholic Charities, Season of Sharing. You can also go through the county social services and see if you're eligible for people with children, CalWorks, for anyone, CalFresh or food stamps. For single adults, GA is an option, and that's often one that people rely on while they're waiting for the Social Security process if their SDI runs out. And IHSS, or in-home supportive services, is a way for someone to get paid for being a caregiver, and it's a way for people to get services that they need in home. And yeah, there are various other options as well, but those are some things that I would look at first.
So maybe one more question here. Since SSI is more strict in terms of home and income and assets, would a monthly amount being paid to an SSI recipient, if they get a one-time monetary gift of $3,000, perhaps from a relative, would that impact their what they get on SSI?
It could, and there are very special rules about one-time gift payments. And so it sort of depends on where the payment is coming from and what it's for. If it's something like you're getting out of like, you know, you sued someone in small claims court because of, you know, an injury that they did to you or injury to your property, and you're getting a payment that's just basically reimbursing you for something that was damaged, then that shouldn't count as income at all. Also, is there an argument that that it's a loan? You know, is there an argument that you have to pay it back? If so, that's not income. But it sort of depends on where the money comes from. An important bright line rule is that if you get a big lump sum, you need to report it very quickly to Social Security. If you're on Medi-Cal, report it to Medi-Cal, and then they give you a certain amount of time to what they call spend it down. What that means is that you have to show that you spent it. You have to show your receipts showing you didn't just take it out of the bank and put it in your mattress, that it's actually been spent. And then once they see that it's not money that you have sitting around in your account that might put you over the asset limit, once they see that, then everything should be fine. But do know that when you receive money, in the month you receive it, it's called income. And so it's more about whether you're over the income limit. And then the next month, it becomes an asset. So if you get a payment on like the 30th of the month, that's the worst time to get a big lump sum because you have no time to spend it down and it immediately becomes an asset. And if you're over the asset limit, that's it. There are certain, like I mentioned, there are some exceptions depending on where you got the payment, where it came from. But just some bright line rules. Make sure you report it and make sure when you spend it down, you keep proof.
Well, that's great. Let's see. See if there's one short one here. I don't understand. There's a couple that I don't quite understand. If someone is positive COVID-19, can he or she qualify for both unemployment and SDI, or only one or the other?
So it's best to make a decision because the rules for who is eligible for both seem to be in conflict. With unemployment insurance, you have to be certifying that you are actively looking for work and you are actively ready to work. That if someone offered you a job tomorrow, you would take it. You know what I mean? You'd be able to go in. With SDI, you're saying, I cannot work because I am physically or mentally unable to do so. And you have to have your doctor saying, yeah, this person, can't work because of a condition. And so, so you're really, because you're having to sign, these applications under penalty of perjury, to my mind, it looks conflicting if you say that you're wanting both, because you can't both be ready to work and also completely unable.
Yeah, and there are some, if someone wants to know more, they should listen to our training that we had on unemployment and COVID-19, because there are some current new things that are out there. So, and we will include a link to that. So, gosh, Nora, I want to thank you so much for your time. I want to thank all the participants for your wonderful, wonderful conversations, your wonderful questions. It's been great. And I hope to see you all again. I wish we could give you a round of applause. Nora, I'll be applauding for everyone.
Oh, the applause is for you all. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you so much, everyone. And we'll look forward to seeing you on another webinar very soon. Thank you so much, and have a good day and a good weekend. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you so much.